Hi, this is Scott Spence, Artistic Director of the Beck Center, and I welcome you to our vlog number 5, episode number 5 already. Thank you, coronavirus, for providing all these weeks to fill of Above the Waist is what we're calling it. And we have another really tremendously exciting guest who has a little different tangent in terms of how her career has gone. And we're going to talk a lot more about that, a little bit of performing, but life has taken her in a different direction, and one that is completely transformative to our industry. So I'm really excited to welcome our guest today, Alicia Rodis. Hi, Alicia. How you doing?
Hey, Scott. It's really good to be here. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Holding up as well as can be expected, and hunkering down and trying to move forward all at the same time.
I hear that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure you do. So one of the first things I always ask is, when all of this hit, when the lights went out, what were you involved in? How did your world come to a stop?
Sure. So let me think. I had just finished up a workshop about 5 days beforehand, and was about to go on set for a show called Mayor of Easttown, which is filming in Philadelphia, and at the same time doing a lot of liaisoning for a production, a TV series in the UK called The Nevers. And the UK was on a little bit of a different timeline than we were on. But this, in the context of this, I'm working for HBO as the lead intimacy coordinator for all of their series and or for all their productions. And so, at first it was just pushing some scenes, and things are getting a little funky, and then there hit a point where I'm not sure what the exact day was, where I finally just messaged the second AD and I said, "What's going on?" And he was like, 8 weeks. I'm like,
oh, wow.
Copy that.
Yeah.
And, the email started coming in from the studio. And then, the next day was the UK saying, "Hey, 8 weeks, let's see." And we, my assistant was over actually doing some work, and she was about to leave to go to Florida the next day to visit her family. And she looked at me and I looked at her, and we were watching the press conferences, and she was like, "I don't think I should fly." And I was like, "No, I don't think you should either. I think you should drive, because I think you might be there a long time."
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, well, we're going to circle back to the phrase that you just hopped on the table there of intimacy director, which is really what's going to steer all of this. But before we get there and talk about what that is and how you got to that place, I referenced earlier that you're a Beck Center alum. So tell us a little bit. And early on, it was, in your case, I think all of it pre-college, if I'm remembering right, although it's been a few years, so feel free to correct me. But tell us about, how you got started with the Beck Center.
Yeah. So, growing up in Westlake, Ohio, I had a bug to start doing some performing. I was a very outgoing child, and my mom actually knew of the Beck Center and absolutely loved it there, and she started putting me into classes there. And, around the same time, I was, I'm not sure if it was before or after, but I started taking classes at Berea Summer Theater, started doing a little bit of performing there. I got into my first play ever when I was 12 years old, which was Narnia. And I was a reindeer and a step. And it just lit up my life. It made me so happy. I just, every Saturday was Beck Center Saturday and McDonald's afterwards. I auditioned for every show. I did not get into every show. And then as, I was growing up a bit, I started doing the teen theater shows, and then continued on to the main stage shows, which is where you and I got to work together.
Right.
And it was mostly almost all before college. And then I came back. I took a year off from college and I came back, and I think I did one show then.
Okay.
When Eating Raoul came back.
Oh, you did. That's right. You were one of the people that carried through to both runs, because
Oh yeah.
we didn't do that back to back. We took a year or two off in between those two runs.
Yeah, yeah. But it was very formative to, everything that happened afterwards. I ended up going to Wright State for acting. I believe you wrote one of my letters of recommendation.
Really? Oh, that's kind of cool.
Mhm.
It's so funny. Mike Chernus surprised me with a video, with an interview. He interviewed me when he was 15, and he still had it, and he sent it on to me. And I was like, I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
I love it. I love it so much.
Cool. So Eating Raoul, you did both productions, and I think Rocky Horror Show with us. Was any I'm missing? Did you do?
Oh God, there was Dames at Sea when I was in high school.
Right.
Yeah, and for the children's theater, and it was around the 50th anniversary, I think, when I came in.
Okay.
And yeah, I know there were some teen theater shows. Oh God, I can't even think of them right now. But
that's okay.
But Lynette Gutman was a huge part of everything I was doing. She did. She helped me with all of my auditions. Meg Chamberlain helped me with all of my auditions for colleges.
Right.
It was really, my foundation was everything that was going on at Beck Center.
Well, great. Well, something must have clicked, because you are, in a word, very successful right now. We're not quite there yet. I want to continue the journey. You referenced that you went to Wright State with the idea, I'm assuming, of continuing on a performance track.
Yeah. I majored in acting at Wright State, which was phenomenal. It was a conservatory program. It was a BFA program, and they kicked my ass in many ways. And something, I guess, that really lays the groundwork for what it is that I ended up doing later is that, by the time I was 14, it was kind of the joke in my family that I was playing every slutty best friend role there was. So, even before Eating Raoul and Rocky Horror, I was getting cast as the Ado Annies. I was getting cast as, and I danced. I was very confident in my body. And in fact, I remember auditioning for Eating Raoul, and you, Scott, right at the end of the audition going, "You're 18, right?"
I was pretending to cover my bases, no doubt.
I was like, yeah. Because it was just such advanced. It was a romping, like, sex comedy, and was so fun. But yeah, I had no issue with that. I was, very, external, and I had a great time doing those roles. And I was also a low alto, so, it also fit in my range very well. So I went off to Wright State, where, to be honest, I continued playing a lot of those roles. I was the Saragina in 9, and, the Rowena in Biloxi Blues and stuff like that.
Sure.
I referenced they kicked my ass because we also had a huge stage combat program there.
That's where I was going to go next. Yeah, is to see how you got interested, because your career is very linear. It very well went from one thing to another, and now you are so stage combat, like, and I was certified at one point as well, and that's a really cool cottage industry too.
Oh yeah. Bruce Cromer was our, my acting teacher, and also our fight teacher, our stage combat teacher there. And I had that dance background. I had a little bit of martial arts training. It really just paid off. And what I loved about stage combat was that I felt empowered in this different way. I always felt very empowered with my body and certain stories that I could always tell, but I felt empowered that I could tell these stories of not just playing the victim, but also the successor, also the person who, I could have badass moments that were different from what even might have been considered badass moments of roles that I played before. I got to do 3 certification tests through the Society of American Fight Directors my senior year. And when I started working in regional theater as a performer, I would go and work on shows or for a season where they would be like, "Oh, we need a fight captain. Oh, great. You have some training. Can you fight captain for us?"
Right.
So, you know, and then I got to work with more fight directors and, you know, I loved physical storytelling. That was really my passion. So
Yeah.
continued on with that.
And that led to the next step on the ladder, that led to some stunt work. Not only, I'm sure, a little bit in theater, but you started to branch out into film and television as a stunt woman for a little bit of time. Stunt person. Let's
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I had moved to New York City. I actually was performing at Renaissance fairs doing performing in an all-female sword fighting troupe called the Vixens on Guard, which was a great, honestly, side weekend gig that I could, you know, perform in the city during the week. And, you know, do auditions and everything, and then perform on the weekends at the Renaissance Fair for tips, sword fighting. And, you know, all of that, it's like where vaudeville went to die, like, but except it thrives.
Oh, no, yeah, we know Renaissance Fair in this house very well.
Right? So, you know, it was such a great opportunity to really work all of that commedia dell'arte, all of our Shakespeare, all of that training that I had, and of course, fight work. And also, because it's interactive theater, you find a way to really put your boundaries down because you're interacting with crowds all the time. So there were times where it's like, and this is where the boundary is, and this is where we stop, and this is where we go into real life. So you know, at that time, I had some friends who I'd met through Stage Combat, who were then doing film and TV work, and they were like, hey, we need a 5'4" blonde to fall down a flight of stairs. It's about your height and weight. Can you fall down a flight of stairs? I'm like, yeah, probably.
Let's see.
Right. And, you know, I had stunt coordinators who knew how to take care of me, who knew how to help train me, who gave me the right tools for things that were being brought in for, even just for small things. And so I started going down that path a little bit and just following my friend Corey Pierno and Drew Leary. They were stunt coordinators on a lot of indie films in New York. I started following them. They would hire me from here and there. And they also started bringing me in on educational work. So for the NYU film department and stuff like that, people are doing small like thesis films and everything. And I would come in and cut my teeth on how to really how film and TV worked, but also how to really low-key stunt coordinate and work with all the different departments through indie films and small films like that.
Did you ever get to work with a gentleman named David Boucher?
I did. Oh yeah, he was one of the founders of the SAFG.
He's a trippy guy. I did the 3-week Las Vegas internship, and he was, you know, one of the leading people, and he dubbed me a scrapper. So, you know, I mean, that's always what I loved, was the empty-handed. But yeah, I remember Night of the Fights and doing, you know, Juno and the Paycock, and, you know, brawling. You're a brawler, Spence. But what a funny guy he was.
Oh yeah. All the old school fight guys are a trip. Fight guys and gals, they are a trip. Yeah.
So one day on set, you're doing some stunt work, and there was some other things happening that involved some actor intimacy. So this is really the springboard moment that takes you to the career that you have found yourself in right now as one of the founders of a group called Intimacy Directors International, right? So that's the end game here. So that's the big picture. Tell us what happened on the set that day that changed your life.
Yeah. So honestly, the first one was for I was fight directing for theater. There were two. It kind of happened at the same time. Because I'm still working in theater, doing fight as a fight director, as a stage combat teacher for some universities, and you know, I was called in for a slap. So slap, can you come in and work on this? Sure. And I came in, and it was a slap and it was a kiss. And I watched these actors go into this moment of like, you know, doing the slap. They got it perfectly. It was really lovely. They do the slap, and then you just see them tense up and look at each other. And the director is like, do you have anything for this? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, I've done my fair share of kissing scenes before, and set them up, and I was like, hey, so why don't we talk about this next moment, just like how we talked about the slap? So first off, why are we doing this? Why is the slap happening? And we started chatting about it, and I was like, okay, let's talk about who initiates this. Let's talk about, where our points of contact are. Let's talk about this just like how we talked about the fight, the small bit of violence that we just did. And you just saw them all go, oh, right. This is another part of the story we're telling.
Right.
Great. We don't have to do the kiss today, but let's talk about it. Let's set our placements so that then when I come back next week, we can set this and go further, just like how we bring a fight up to speed. And at the same time, I was working with a student at NYU who had brought me in to do the stunt coordinating for some of her short films. And she said, I've got a sex scene coming up. What do I do? And I'm like, let's look at the SAG-AFTRA protocols for a sex scene. Okay, there's like nothing here for a sex scene. You know what? This is a really involved scene. Why don't we handle this the same way we handled the last stunt we did? So let's do a risk assessment. Let's talk to the performers, see what they're capable of, what they're comfortable doing. And then let's do a rehearsal. Let's go through it. And we coordinated the intimacy just like we did any of the stunts. And I had heard of a woman named Tonya Sina who had written her thesis on intimacy choreography and had done some workshops at some fight workshops. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Can we talk? And she said, yep, I'll be in New York next week. We met up. We spent 4 hours in a Brooklyn apartment. And at the end of it, she said, I'm thinking about starting a company. Do you want to start a company? And I was like, yeah. I do.
Think there may be a need.
Yeah. And we spent the next couple of years, her, myself, and Siobhan Richardson, creating protocols, something called the Pillars, doing researching with, other directors, movement directors, psychologists, trauma experts about how to best go about this. So we created Intimacy Directors International, which is a non-for-profit, and we did exactly that.
Amazing. And so did that happen before HBO found you for one of your most, I think propelling, and high profile things, which I think was your booster rocket recently in the last 3 years. So you founded IDI first, and then tell us the day that HBO came knocking at your door.
Sure. We had founded IDI back in 2015. Pre Me Too,
Also a bit of an accelerant. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, there's no question. And people thought this is a really great idea, but we don't have the budget for it, or we're fine. And
right.
Me Too happened, and actually Profiles Theater happened first. And people went, maybe we need to talk about this more. And then Me Too happened. And so there's a show called The Deuce that was filming in New York City. And they had already filmed season 1.
With Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really an excellent series, but quite sexual in nature, no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's about the pornography industry. And so between the first and second season, some of the actors, in particular Emily Mead, who's playing Lori, who is a porn star, the character in the show, said, I'm not comfortable anymore. Like, I have more questions than I have answers. There's got to be some other way to do this. And the producers said, okay, let's try to figure this out. And I got a call from the line producer, Andrew Sachs. I was actually at a stunt woman's meetup group, and I took the call, and I checked my messages, and he left me this message, and I still have it, and I bust his chops about it because it sounded like he was calling a prostitute. Like, he couldn't say the word intimacy. He was like, so I am a producer with a show. I'm looking at a website. I see you perform a service. I think we need I promise I am a producer.
It's
like,
not a lecherous call.
no. And I called him back and we had a chat and I said, he said, can you come in for an interview tomorrow? And I said, sure. And I walked into the interview and there was HBO Legal, David Simon, George Pelicanos, who are the showrunners and the showrunners from The Wire and Treme, and and all of these people. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm so glad I wore a suit jacket today.
It's a real adult meeting.
Oh yeah.
Well, in more ways than one.
Oh yes. And I sat down and they just went, okay, so how does this work? And I was like, I haven't done this for a TV series before. So let's talk about what's going on with you and how can I help? And, at the end of it, we were like, we're going to figure this out together. And they hired me a few hours later. I was in the read through and meeting the cast the next day. And we were writing protocols for the next few weeks.
Yeah. And this service that, that this provides clearly is there to protect the actors, from, the actual act of having to do what they need to do, even if it's as simple as a kiss, which is not going to be so simple anymore. Our world has changed. That all, that takes on, extra ramifications, but also, for nudity issues, harassment issues, just making sure, and ultimately, if done right, it's a two-way street. It protects everyone, the director, a producer, because everyone's on the same page. This is really just as crucial as all fight choreography has become.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, they at first, and still, and HBO ended up bringing me on, after the first few months, asked me to start going on some other sets, and then
Right.
They hired me full time to just work for them, and I'm on an exclusive contract with them where I basically assist on the studio side, but also work on set, basically wherever they want to throw me. So it's certainly interesting as far as where I'm going to end up next for what show.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd work with directors and even actors who would be like, oh, I don't need this. Like, it's fine. I'd be like, okay, cool. You're totally comfortable. Sounds great. Let's just make sure all of our paperwork's good.
Right.
And as soon as we would start talking through what we were doing, I've had actors who are very well-known actors who've been doing this for 30, 40 years,
Right.
saying, I can't believe this is the first time I'm having this conversation with someone who is not in the power position.
Right. And that's such a key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, usually when someone like pulls back, and I've had directors like, but we're fine. I'm like, great, wonderful. And then, we get on set and we're in the midst of working a scene and they're like, so Alicia.
And it's
what is the wording anymore? There's a lot to consider, and we specifically educated ourselves to have the correct, or at least the most appropriate terminology and
Right.
ways to express that still keeps it artistic, but also gives an artistic merit and license to it.
We're there to tell the story.
Exactly.
And you also approach this much more, not as a policeman or a gatekeeper, but as a counselor, an advocation counselor for all parties, but especially the performer. And I think that's really important, that you're not there. You're not the NBC censor.
Oh no. And that has definitely been something that I've come across with producers and honestly, the general public, where they're like, oh, so you're here to censor. And I'm like, no, I have done, and I am here to just make sure we're all on the same page,
Right.
and to assist in the storytelling of it, and to be a voice if a voice needs to be amplified, because I'm not going to speak for anyone. I'm not going to assume anything. And certainly if when they ask about my personal background, I'm like, listen, I faked my first orgasm on stage when I was 16. I had my first nude scene when I was 18. I get it. I
Right.
do.
I've been there. Yeah. Well, that's great that you can speak with empirical, evidence, and clearly Beyond the Deuce, some other great titles, have come your way. Although the list is growing daily, but it includes The Plot Against America, which just finished up its run, which I adored and was so sad that the last episode aired. It was terrific. And Crashing, episodes of Westworld, and the upcoming This Much Is True. So I mean, some major titles, and I'm sure you're keeping your hand in where you can in the theater world as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Working a lot with SDC, the Stage Directors and Choreographers Union. One of our people, Claire Warden, she's the first one intimacy director to work on Broadway. So she's been highly involved there as well. I got to work on Watchmen this past year, and also the pilot was the first show outside the Deuce that they put me on. I'm very blessed, and try to stay very humble about the whole thing, because
Sure.
It's part of the whole thing with film and TV, and people, that honestly is part of why intimacy coordination for film and TV is so needed, because we can get so wrapped up, people can get so wrapped up in just like the Wild West feel of the industry. And
Right.
it's nice to be able to be there, to be able to advocate and be able to just help with, at the end of the day, story.
Right. Well, and as we progress through the Me Too movement and all the other stuff that surrounds it, it's quickly apparent that in your industry, you are no longer a luxury. You are not the dramaturg of the world. Like, if we can afford someone to do some historical background for the playbill, that's great. And only a few theaters, around can afford that. But in terms of film and television, it's almost to a point where it's a liability not to have you. What an amazing position to be in. And that sort of sparks my last question, is like the SAFD, the Society for American Fight Directors, who have programs not only to train actor combatants, but also to train teachers and fight choreographers. I'm assuming you've already branched out, that part of your industry now, that the three of you have done, is to figure out how to empower and teach this process, because I don't know if the other two partners are as active as you are, or if they're more on the business side, but there's only one or two or three of you to go around. So what are you doing? What is your, in a nutshell, long-term plan here to try and grow this?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, IDI was created so that we could let the world know that intimacy, direction, and coordination was a thing. And we succeeded with that. So we actually ended up closing IDI, and a few of us created a new company called Intimacy Directors and Coordinators, which is a new company that we're doing all of our education work through, and just gives us a huge amount more flexibility in working through this new company. So we have multiple levels of education that we're doing. One is education for universities for performers. So those acting majors, those general theater practitioner majors that are going through right now can have some work, some knowledge of consent, of how to say no. We come from the world of yes and.
Sure. Right. You can not say no and afraid you're going to never get hired again.
Right. So we have a huge educational department for universities. We also work with the university staff. We do training for faculty. We do, and also help them implement protocols to their department. So currently I'm also working with Columbia University here in New York, for their film department and for their theater department. I also do freelance choreography for them and intimacy direction for them. Through the new company, we're working at literally dozens of universities right now, setting up these protocols, because we want the new generation to be to know how this works and to feel like they have a voice.
Right.
And then we also have, as another part of IDC, is also educating directors in how to work with intimacy directors or intimacy coordinators. Also protocols for directors, because, you know, I recently worked with, had some calls with Kevin Kelly, and even some people back, Greg Helms, and people back in Ohio that I worked with, of just giving some general advice. If you don't have an intimacy director for your play or an intimacy coordinator for your film or TV series, here are some ways that you can communicate with the actors that will help with making sure your rehearsal and your performance goes smoothly. And then, of course, there's also answering the need for more intimacy directors and coordinators, which within our company, if you go to our website, idcprofessionals.com, you will see a huge list of intimacy directors and coordinators that we have trained, specifically some for film and TV, and then specifically some for the theater that are in different regions.
Right. Well, I know I, for one, you know, will look forward to, you know, when you get so far branched out as to offer, you know, regional workshops, you know, for directors, because, you know, there'll be a lot of us who, you know, probably can't afford, you know, to bring on someone specifically, although I'm sure you'll work on tiering, you know, rates to needs and abilities of theaters as best you can. But, you know, I think it's empowering if directors, like everything else, you know, if a workshop, whether, you know, I mean, I come to New York for a workshop like this, because there's so much there that you haven't considered, and you look back at a career and going, my gosh, I really could have used a hand in figuring that out for the best of the production and the people you're working with.
Yeah, and we have regional workshops. We've got levels, different levels set out on the website. Of course, we don't have any right now.
Yeah, right, of course, yes.
That was also something that definitely a big monkey wrench was thrown into us, because we had about a dozen workshops lined up all across the country, and some in Canada, that just went, well, we definitely can't be teaching an intimacy workshop right now.
Right. Which is so ironic, of course. But, you know, when this comes back, and it will come back, you know, now you have a whole other layer on top of this that doesn't necessarily have to do with, you know, sexuality on stage, but simply personal space and how we handle this. And, you know, it's going to be, perhaps it will be short term, but there's going to be long-term lessons to learn from it.
Oh no, yeah, you know, even just speaking with my friends and, you know, other performers and choreographers, etc., even just being in a quarantine style situation for a certain number of months, there's a certain amount of fear, you know. There's going to be a lot of work to do when we come back, as far as getting past what, you know, even the most minor of trauma that that something like this can really cause. So
yeah,
you know, I think if anything, and people have said, oh, do you think intimacy is going to go away? And it's like, intimacy is never going to go away. And
but will we be kissing through masks? That'll be right. How do we handle that one?
I think it depends on your story, Scott.
Absolutely. Let's be the first. So I know I'm already thinking about what likely is my fall show, going, yeah, okay, there's some moments there. How are we going to handle that so that everybody is comfortable with? But literally, as silly as, and this isn't pertain, but I'm thinking, okay, when we figure out our seating, I bet in a show that I'm thinking of, we can't do a seating in the front row because actors who articulate also spit, you know? Right? Yeah. I mean, you know, it just happens. And so you don't want to be in the splash zone in 2020.
God, I didn't even think about that.
How about that? So you can bring me on as a special think tank counselor here. Alicia Rodis, I am so grateful to you for making time for us today, and I'm just beyond proud. I mean, what a wonderful thing to have an alum who is at the forefront of an entire new branch of this industry. And I hope that, you know, I hope that we can continue to work together in so many different ways. You know, we want to advocate on your behalf, and we would love you to advocate on ours as part of the proud Beck Center family.
Oh, absolutely. It is truly my pleasure to be able to give back in any way. And I mean, really, you all lit the flame for me. So thank you for everything you and Beck Center has done.
Thank you. We love to be the flame lighters. So thank you again to Alicia. This was episode 5 of Above the Waist. Remember, nonprofit arts organizations need your help now more than ever. And we're always willing to take a donation or two at our website, www.beckcenter.org. Until next time, Scott Spence, Artistic Director of the Beck Center. Stay well, everyone.